Hello, hello, and welcome back to Shelf Talks, the podcast where we dive deep into the journeys of fearless female founders bringing their products to retail. I'm your host, Roberta, and today we're mixing things up literally. I'm sitting down with the incredible Sonia Smith-Kang, founder of Mix Up Clothing, a brand that beautifully blends culture through fashion. Sonia's mission goes beyond just style. She's creating a movement that celebrates diversity, identity, and representation throughout every stitch. Welcome, Sonia.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on and saying yes. Excited to learn more about yourself as well as your brand. So let's dive in.
Perfect.
So, what was your life like before starting Mix Up Clothing?
Yeah, I was actually a registered nurse. I went to school, the University of San Francisco, to become a registered nurse. And, I was kind of the multicultural nurse on the unit. So I loved that intersection of culture and health. Whether it's foods you bring in, whether it's a prayer rug or, those kind of things that help in your healing. I was always kind of intrigued by that. And it always got me kind of thinking about intersectionality between culture and whatever it was, healthcare, moving forward to fashion, so those kind of things. But yeah, I loved what I was doing. And I saw that as being my future. But when I started having children, I was really wanting an intentional life. And so that meant for me loving who I was, which is Afro Latina. My father's African American, my mother's Mexican American. They were both in the service. So I was born in Puerto Rico. And then my family moved and we were stationed on the Hawaiian island of Oahu. And so fast forward, I'm a nurse, I get married, and my husband is Korean American. And so really wanted to have our culture lead everything that we did. And so there's these celebratory kind of holidays that happen around cultural days of celebration. And my kids would wear some of their Korean wear or Latino wear, whatever it was. And I wanted to kind of emulate that same pride and feeling that you get during those celebratory times. And what if I could do something every day? Like, what if I could give them a pair of shorts with some fun print on it? And so that they could kind of start engaging in that way. And that's exactly what I did.
That's beautiful. I love what you said too, just about being like intentional with your life and incorporating heritage and diversity and kind of in your everyday.
Yes,
So,
yes.
had you known anything about apparel? Had you taken lessons, sewing lessons, or anything like that in the past?
Well, you know what? So sewing, I am the daughter of, someone who sews, and they used to actually teach sewing in school. So I've known how to sew since seventh grade. So I knew there were that parts that you could sew for stress reliever as it being in a critical care environment. I could go downtown LA and get some fabrics that have a cultural kind of feel to them and turn them into my kids' diaper covers or a cute dress or some shorts. And that's exactly how it started. My kids were rocking these skater shorts, but instead of, polka dots or stripes or whatever it was, calaveras or Day of the Dead prints or, the girls could have, some other things that, resonated with them. I have two girls, two boys. And so there was just something about being able to make and kind of live the life that, we wanted. And all of a sudden, I was getting stopped on the streets or in supermarkets and people would be like, "Hey, I remember, a print like that." And then all of a sudden they were saying, "I'm from here and we have these little nesting dolls and we call them, and all of a sudden we were in this store talking about each other and our culture. And I thought, what if I could do something around the idea of culture and the idea of having that be a way to educate others on different cultures? And so I knew nothing. That was a long way to say I knew nothing about retail, about fashion, about starting a line. And so, yeah, it was really, I knew how to do CPR and start IVs and do all this stuff like, And all of a sudden I was like, wait, business plan, it's been a huge learning curve for me. But all that to say, and here we are, bumps and all. So yeah. So she's come a long way.
Yeah. So you didn't initially even think about actually having a brand or starting a line. This was really just for your own children to love their heritage.
Yeah, that's how it started. And, we talk about, the Oprah aha moments. And it was those kind of conversations around culture with other folks and educating, which is pretty much my essence. My kids by now, they know my spiel, they know my, everything that I kind of lead with and talk about. And so I'm always talking about it in some way, culture, heritage, diversity, all those kind of things. And when I would go into the supermarkets, and again, for my children, I would see diaper boxes that didn't look like them, or, you know, baby food that didn't have, it just what for me was I was very aware that Black and brown faces weren't in the retail space. And I remember complaining about it and being upset that, things hadn't gotten better from when I was, growing up and kind of just saying the same things. So instead of, kind of just talking about it, I wanted to be part of the change. I wanted to be part of the folks that were coming in from different industries, and kind of all of us saying, wouldn't it be nice to have books that look like our children or look like ourselves? Wouldn't it be great if we could, hear music that, whatever it was. So I wanted to be that. Wouldn't it be great if fashion talked about and showed, these wonderful prints from around the world that our neighbors, look like, and the languages they speak. And so yeah, it was really for me not only the fashion part, ooh, let's make some, cute skirts or whatever it was. For me, it was really this impact and the mission behind it all. I just happened to make clothes in order to talk about those things.
Yeah, I love that too because wearing the clothes definitely starts the conversation. And it's an easy conversation to help educate people and make people aware that maybe don't know the culture or understand kind of what that represents.
Exactly. When we're talking about, founder stories or journeys, the running theme that I kind of hear in the through line is that if it was a problem for you or a challenge for you, there's probably other folks that are, hoping to see
Yeah.
and wish were out there. Yeah, I think that's kind of, they talk about not chasing the money, chasing the mission. And I really lean into that because, sometimes it's you got more mission than you do,
The money coming in.
the money coming in. So yeah, so it's helpful when you have a business that is motivated by, man, I want to, change the world or whatever it is that you want to do. So yeah, mixed up clothing is very mission driven.
Yeah. So, how long were you making clothes specifically for your children before you kind of had that aha moment to say, I want to do something bigger and I want to start a brand?
Yeah, it wasn't very long, after that. I think there were, the having the kids wear the clothes to, ooh, I'm gonna put this on Etsy. This was all pre, where we are now. I should have started by saying, this was since 2016. And, even before that, which was just, me and the kids kind of putting the clothes on. So it's been a while, but this was all pre, where we are now. So it's the farmer's market. If my company had at the hospital had Maker Day or little outdoor farmers health expo, I would bring my stuff. And then my husband was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, he's like, "You're taking orders and you're asking for your projections. Like, what is this?" And so all of a sudden, I was heading to small business associations or women owned, how to start a business. And so there were those kind of moments. But when I really knew, it was like I was heading to New York for the Today Show, And it was Mama Four starts clothing line that celebrates culture and diversity. And I was like, okay, yes, yes, we are in business. And so, yeah, it really started off as, a love for my children and wanting them to grow to being this can be something that, the larger group, the larger community could learn from.
Yeah. Yeah. So initially selling on Etsy, were you making the clothes still in your home?
Yes. So that was, yeah. So that was, talk about all hands on deck. Yeah, I was making the clothes, packaging them. It was like, where are you shipping from? Where's your warehouse? And I was like,
My living room.
yes. And yeah, for sure. And it's all those, wonderful origin stories.
So what was initial feedback from consumers as you were selling them on those platforms?
They loved it. They loved that you could see, whether it was, piñatas on one of the dresses or skirts. So I think the initial reaction was, I see it. And, and then the next thing was, have you thought of this fabric or, have you thought of, cherry blossoms? And so all of a sudden I had all these, folks giving me their opinions on the next collection. And I was like, let me just, get this collection going. So I think the validation part was a two-parter. It was folks having an emotional reaction to it and feeling like, oh my gosh, I remember, my grandma had a doily that she'd put on the chair, but it reminded me of this print. And I'm like, yes, my grandmother had the same little lace doily. So it's like that connection. And the part that is, tell me more. The response was like, I wish I had that when I was a kid, or this is what we should have been doing. It was those kind of reassurances along with that financial proof, right? Like it's all great when folks are like, "Ooh, I love it." It's nice to have, the quality kind of part, but the quantity is kind of that measurable part that when folks are actually, what are they ordering and how much are they willing, to
To
pay for
spend?
that?
Yeah. Yeah. Knowing that you really didn't have a true apparel background, how did you even come up with kind of your initial line that you were selling?
Yeah, it was a lot of checking other folks and who was in the space alone. It was pre-chat GPT, which I would have loved back then. But it was, the Google and those things like, how do you start a fashion line? It was as simple as that. And I think that was at the time where Project Runway was kind of taking off, and you would see them in the fabric area downtown because Fitum is right here. And so it was me just going into these fabric stores and talking to whoever would talk to me. Like, how do people make samples? And, getting recommendations. And I ended up found a husband and wife team. She does your sketches, tech packs, and all those kind of the technical part. And then her husband would cut the fabric. And so I would be lugging my, rolls of fabric. I'd pick up my stuff from her and then go to the husband and he'd cut it. And then I'd have my kids on one part of, the in the car, and the other I would like run out, give them my run this out to so would I tell you, it was really everything was piecemeal. It was, every lesson took forever. So to go from idea to final product, like I learned like all the pieces that went to it, went as part of it. And those folks really helped me on my way to become, the at home seamstress maker to, okay, now someone else can duplicate this. And she's got her line sheet and she's got her lookbook and look at her go. She's got her, all these things. And now someone else can translate and make what I wanted. So that's kind of how the physical part of the clothes, but then that part where it's getting the business license, the bank account, the looking through trademarks and names, getting certifications. I mean, the whole thing is like just because you have a website, like you're not fully on until like all the other stuff that
Yeah.
comes with it. And so that for me really just came from networking opportunities that I took full advantage of. And, people think, "Don't you miss nursing?" And I'm like, no, I use it every day, really.
In what capacity?
Yeah, the critical thinking part, the one that kind of like starts with maybe, say you have a patient and you're like, well, what do I need to do first? So there's the delegating part that I still use. There's the triage, like I need to go to check out, manufacturing, and then I'll hit social media, and then I'll hit the podcasts at the end. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm still using that. And there's also the part that is research, everything that we do. And then we have data, and then we have to analyze that. And do you
Mm-hmm.
still, do you take that hypothesis you used, or do you change the medication or the, whatever it is? So I'm constantly using it to kind of help guide the business part of mixed up clothing. And really it's just continuing to ask questions.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you really just did the work using Google, going down to the garment, asking anybody that could help you to understand kind of the
Yeah.
processes and how to make it work. Yeah. Okay. So you talked briefly about flying to New York to be on TV, on national TV. So tell that story. How did that even happen?
I am forever, pitching myself. I have all my little decks that are like investor deck, social media deck, whatever it is. And so I was constantly kind of looking around, and I would just go to LinkedIn and be like producer of this, whatever it was. So again, that research, right?
Yeah.
And saying, hey, I loved your segment on moms who were whatever. Wouldn't it be great to show your audience that, mom of the, whatever, that I'm making clothes? And they were like, oh, amazing. And there I was. They were like, we love the idea. Let's get you on. Let's have you ship the clothes out and talk about it. And that was my first like appearance and of saying just like the launch, and really trying to understand the language that needed to be used for different folks depending on who you were pitching or who you were talking to.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, were you shocked to have an answer and say, come on out to
I'm always
really?
shocked. Look, I am always shocked. And then I was like, are you gonna put us up? Like what? Like now I was, thinking, oh, like I get a hotel room, and like it was over. I caught the TV bug, and I was like, look, I need to be on every show. So then I started kind of pitching the clothes and getting pretty good, responses from folks. And now the time period, we're kind of heading towards more pandemic, post George Floyd, racial reckoning, so I'm just trying to frame for you like where mixed up clothing was in that kind of timeline. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, when was the decision made, or had you always had the thought of going into retail, or when did you kind of think about that and want to create a strategy around that?
Yeah, very early on, I had followed one of our competitors, and I started, looking at where they were, right? So as founders, looking at your competitors, and not necessarily in a negative way, but finding what your differentiator, right? And also parts that you want aspirational.
Right.
And so there was a brand that had two moms, Caucasian. They love to travel and share, their world with their children, and so they started a clothing line. And one of the things that I learned was I was like, wait, I would love to have someone from the community who actually has those lived experiences, share that kind of story through the clothes. And so, again, going back to that, who better to tell our stories than us? I was
Hmm.
like, oh no, I'm not going to have someone, just fly somewhere and think, oh, let me, tell the story. So I was trying to figure out where they were and what the market was looking for. And one of the things that I saw was they were in a large retailer. So I knew that there was a market, but I was trying to figure out how I was going to position myself. So, again, not being part of the fashion and retail and founder space, I really didn't have a sense of etiquette, maybe, of like, ooh, she went straight to the division head. She should have gone to, you know what I mean? Like
Right. Yeah.
all those little things, like all of a sudden, like chain of command or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I was already on VP of and so they were like, "Oh, no, you need to go here." And so I was pitching Macy's. And again, because I felt like my people were there and, I felt like it was going to be a great fit. And it turns out they put me on to like this accelerator called the workshop at Macy's. And so they were like, "Yeah, this is great. Why don't you show us what you have?" And again, not knowing that you needed the lookbook, the line sheet, the boo, boo, boo.
Yeah.
I was making things as I was going. So I submitted, I got in, we went out there and they taught us how to work in retail, large retailers, what you needed, all the certifications, all the EDI kind of compliance where your system talks to their system and all those kind of things. So they gave me the rundown. Last day, they have a pitch competition and they got all the same folks I emailed, and then they had like celebrity founders that were with Macy's. So at the time it was Lisa Price of Carol's daughter, and so there I was pitching, and I had just boo-hooed because it was my son's birthday, and I was all in my feelings, and and the person in charge of the accelerator of the program that was serving Black and brown designers, I know she just wanted to say, "Get it together," but she was very, like, "Look, you have a story. Like,
Hmm.
let's, get in there and just tell the story." I was like, "But they want," and, whatever it was. So I pitch, fast forward, I got a meeting, and the timing, I would say, wasn't right because like I was already trying to run when I probably should have,
Mm.
still been, um, you know, so yeah, so I backed up, but always kept the communication open, and then went back and was like, "I'm ready. Like, I'm in here, I'm in this, these boutiques, I'm selling on Amazon. Here are my numbers." Because I think they really can put folks out of business if you're not, ready. And they really prepared that during the program. So now when I was ready, we got in. And so it's been really great. They're a great partner. And I use that to kind of parlay, like, "Hey, she's in Macy's. How about being here?" And so I use that as not only marketing, but as, a way to get into other retailers and kind of pursue those goals that I have for us.
Yeah. So just to back up, when you were in the workshop and you went to pitch, how did you prepare for that? I know definitely we heard you say you told your story. Were there other things that were valuable that you felt were important
Yeah.
during that pitch?
That's a great question. There's all those different ways to pitch, right? Whether whoever you're talking to. So you have your story, you have your product, and then there's the part that says why. Why you? And so that's the story. Why now? And so the why now was for me again that why we need products for curly hair or textured hair or whatever it was, all those kind of numbers that go into how do you speak their language, which was how do I get more folks in the door if you choose me?
Hmm.
Like, how do I help you get what you want in that way? And so my approach was I have access to this community. You're trying to get this community. So together, let's have this partnership. So I gave numbers from the US Census. If they wanted to put me in 5 doors, I gave numbers for Atlanta, New York, Illinois, Los Angeles, or excuse me, California and Texas. Um, and Hawaii. And so I was very, upfront about why they should have us. And then I talked about our buying power, and how the trillions of dollars Black and brown communities have. I think one of the challenges I have faced is when I'm pitching and I'm trying to tell the story, the folks that I'm looking at do not look like me or don't have that lived experience. And they're like, "Doesn't everybody want, stripes and polka dots?" Like those
Yeah.
kind of things. And you're like, "Wait, yeah, but we also could have this. Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be great to kind of have those, stories and those founders or whatever it is that reflect the community?" And so that was really, something that I found, and it wasn't just in large retailers. It, boutiques, it's marketing, it's influencer ad agencies, it's all those things. Like the amount of folks that do not understand why there's a need. And so you having to kind of fine tune your pitch according to who's in front of you,
Yeah.
and kind of separating, like, this guy does not care that I grew up, hang drying my clothes in the backyard. So I know about sustainability. He just wants to know, if I put your stuff up, will they come? So really having those parts built out and just reading the room was key for me to keep conversations going. And not taking no, I think, would be my other part. It would be like, maybe it's not now, but I'm going to keep checking on you and tell you updates like, I got this win, to look for me on TV, blah, blah, blah. Like, look, I think, it just was a matter of timing, as well as, the dedication and the hard work that goes into relationship building.
Yeah. I think that is a great takeaway for people to listen to, is just in regards to what you were saying about when you're pitching, like you have a plan on how you want to pitch, but being able to kind of change and fluctuate based on the room and what you're getting back from people that are kind of listening to your pitch and seeing if they're engaged or if you need to move on to another point, because you only have a limited amount of time, so you want to make sure that's maximized and you're speaking
Yeah,
the language that the people in front of you are looking to hear.
exactly.
Yeah. And then the second part that I loved that you talked about was just the follow up and providing updates as to where you are and the progression that you're seeing. Cause, of course, us as merchants love to hear that and just stay close to understand what's happening as you're building, to know, to your point, like when you're ready, re-engage in conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, and you did your pitch, and then you said you kind of stepped back and didn't initially get into Macy's and started hitting boutiques. Was that something that they had told you to do? Did you come back and think about maybe starting in a smaller group of stores to start? How did that happen?
Yeah, it really had to do with finances, if I'm being truthful, because it's not one of those exciting, like tech bros, or let me invest in this unicorn, or retail and apparel. A lot of us are self-funded, which I had used my 401k from being a nurse, and so I was gung-ho. Like, I was like, let me put, like, how many doors you want? 200 doors open into, like, yes. And then I came back and I was like, are you, like, this is not gonna, to be able to meet this. It's like tens of thousands to get your system to, comply with theirs, and you have to, be able to show, of course, that you're manufacturing ethically. And so there's all the things that needed to be done, that I wanted to be able to, under promise and over deliver.
Yeah.
And I knew at that point that I did not have my system fully in place. And the chargeback system
Hmm.
is, a challenge to some. Um, and so those kind of things, I think I thought it was the holy grail, being in large retailers. But then, read the fine print. There's all this kind of things that you have to do, that I needed to kind of take into consideration a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you find the boutiques and places locally that you wanted to put your brand in?
Yeah, again, with my searches, and I started here in Los Angeles, and so I could just kind of, manage that a little bit better. I could stop by, shoot video, I could do those kind of things. And again, it was walking in and identifying the boutiques that resonate, not on, resonate with me,
Hmm.
but also, like, where would they put me? So I would, do my little walkthrough, and I'd come back and be like, who's your buyer? Those kind of things. And, hey, this is what I do. I love your line by the rock stars section. I think it would be a great fit. So I came in, just kind of knowing where I wanted to help answer a lot of the questions that they might have beforehand. And so some of them wanted to be on consignment. So I put in, 5 styles with maybe 2 to 3 per size. And we did a test. And then from there, it's a numbers game. And so it's, again, that research, who's in your area, do they use black and brown models on their website? Because I'd love to change the world, but I want you to be living with my values as well.
Yeah.
So I found those, just made a list and just kind of just cranked them out and just and I still do that. I still look around and see where folks are shopping and see how, I could be inside those boutiques.
Yeah. That's really smart. Just saying, not saying I want to be everywhere, but being strategic in the place that makes the most sense for your products and your brand. Can you,
Yeah.
for people listening, can you talk a little bit about consignment and that actually is?
Yeah. So what we did was, again, it was, if folks remember, like an IOU, like back in the day, like layaway or those kind of things. So you give them your collection. They put it in their boutique. And once those items sell, you could give it, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, seasonal. And they kind of just, you give them your inventory. They tell you when they sell. And then depending on the store or the boutique, they could get a percentage. So it's almost like being, on an Amazon or, a marketplace where your stuff sits there. And once it sells, then they get a percentage of the sale. And for them, it's beneficial because they don't have to pay for perhaps things that don't sell and you're newer. And so kind of just testing out a partnership. So I would just say, a different way to going and looking at a partnership.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you. Thank you for that. That's great.
Yeah.
So, how long then, once you were in boutiques and starting to sell and gain new consumers into the space, that you felt, okay, I'm ready to go to tackle Macy's again and get into that retailer?
Now we're in that space where it was, the 15% pledge and the CDFI was helping amplify Black and brown designers and the folklore was coming around and it was all these amazing folks that were like, look, we're not playing anymore. Like, let's make sure that, you know,
We're represented.
we're represented
Yeah.
and we're going to have them take pledges, them being the large, retailers and large brands. So I flocked to those pages. I was like, look, yes, sign me up. I was, put under Black creators or designers, whatever it was. And then I went back to Macy's and I was like, look, thank you for taking the pledge. You know, there was I was going to, let me back up. The reason why you do want to continue to have relationship is the turnover or, buyers. And we talk about, maybe the no was no for that person.
Yeah.
But now you got a new person in. And so they're like, hey, Tommy's no longer here, but, Marilyn is or whatever. And let me introduce you to her. And she's like, oh, okay. So, you know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
re-engaging is important. So I went back and I was like, thanks for taking the 15% pledge. I'm one of those, 15%. Is there anything that you are doing to support? And so that conversation happened and they were like, before you had a challenge with, getting the technology that is needed, is that taken care of? I said, yes, now I have it. Because again, I've been making sales. So I put all my money towards, all the kind of infrastructure that is needed, the tech that is needed to work with large retailers. And, they have things that they're like, plastic bags need to be, look like this. The way you ship boxes have to look like this. So I had it all, and I was ready. And so I think that's the point when I was able to go back and before I was not as strong in my voice in like if they told me 200 doors, I would have like sold my house. I would have like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this was, if there was anything this time period taught us was really being honest with not only yourself and your capabilities, but they want the same thing. They want your success. At least you're hoping that when you're having these conversations. So is how about you start, maybe in 6 stores? And so I was like, oh my gosh, they're working with me. This is fantastic. And, now when an order comes in, because if you're on their marketplace, it's very similar to an Amazon where you get an order, your little things kind of start ticking, you get ding, 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 and you're like, oh, Josie made an order and, it gets fulfilled by your team and it's, you in the background, whatever
Right.
it is. So now
Yeah.
you have all those parts in place. And I did know. And of course, it's not a quick turnaround. You don't just say, yes, I'm ready. They give you this, 6 month to a year timeline, acceptance to launch and all those things that you have to meet in between. So yeah, it's a process, and I'm glad now that I waited. I didn't think at the time. I thought, again, I was like, it's never gonna happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Disappointment.
yeah,
But it was worth it to just wait and
correct.
truly be ready. Truly be ready. Yeah. So what did launch ultimately look like?
Yeah. So I laugh because you really think, boy, that when they turn the light on, man, I thought I was gonna
The
wake
sales are
up.
just coming. They're just gonna
I
come.
mean, right? No, no one knows you. No one knows it's on. And it is so painful to know like afterwards cuz like look, I woke up, I was like, "Ooh, New York's been up for 3 hours." Like I know my thing is just blown up. And it's not.
Yeah.
There's so much work that goes beyond like you telling everybody that you're on sale, that you're
Yeah.
there, you're now, they turned it on launch date. So all of these, I am telling you, as someone who's like, if I did it again, I would, do the following because what I did was not the move. Like I just thought, like I said, it was that they were in turn it on and like I was just gonna be like an overnight success.
Success.
And so, yeah, I think there was a lot of lessons learned there that, again, it goes back to constantly talking to your folks. Like, hey guys, like sign the deal with Macy, whatever it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Like, and kind of take them on that and, 1 week till launch, all those things. So there's that part that is external that I could have done,
Yeah.
right? There's an internal part of the store or the large retailer that is the part where you can pay money to maybe be on the first or second page of a search. I was like, wait, what? How much? And it's things like that that you just don't even know at the time. Like once you're in, you're competing against legacy brands that have, hundreds of thousands to spend on Black Friday marketing, that you're
Yeah.
like, wait, I didn't know. You mean you don't just add my name and do all like, oh, and for instance, any kind of brand, if you're, end cap, it's all real estate, right? Like who knew? I know
Yeah.
you knew. And you're like, look, she didn't know that there's end caps versus rounders versus like, and to get closer to this, I got to pay to come over here and for them to put me on their first to Google search, like
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
So, yes. So once you get in, then you have to start making your way not only to the buyers, but to the marketing team. And, how do I get you to run a story for me during Heritage Month or
Hmm.
during Women's Month or whatever it is? Like how do I get on? And who do I talk to? So it's a constant, yeah, lots of communicating and research and tough lessons.
Yeah. So prior to launching, were any of those things communicated to you from the buying team, or that's something you found out post launch?
No, I'm sure it was all there. And I'm sure I thought, like, let me just get in. These are those lessons that you wish, that maybe that extra runway would have helped or those extra marketing dollars. And I think that is the challenge I think underrepresented founders have is like that challenge of I have this pot of money and we just have to make it extend a little bit further and harder and like where am I going to use it? And it becomes this circle like I wanted it to be the monies to go into production, but if nobody knows about you, then you got nothing to produce. So it's a lot of things to go on.
So once then kind of the lights were cut on and you weren't seeing the sales that you initially thought you were, what moves did you make in order to start to get some acceleration from a sales perspective?
Well, yeah, I started with that question. So I went back to my buyers and talked to them and then they were like, "Did we introduce you to the team?" And I'm like, "No. Like now we got to go over here." And then that's kind of how I learned, some of the other things that you learn when you're in those kind of positions. So those are the kind of lessons that I learned at that time, which was, oh, I could still maybe buy in for President's Weekend or whatever it is. Do I have anything that falls into back to school, and what can I give you, and all those things. And a lot of it also had to do with, going back to the networking and the orgs, like who's in retail that can help me answer this. You know and then somebody would be like, I got you, sis, put me on, like, did you ask them about this? And I'm like, no, didn't know I could. And then kind of going back and getting those, nice to haves versus, must knows and must do's. And so I could now write a step by step, but at the time it was really still new and in real time,
Yeah.
making moves. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that, then what were kind of the biggest things that you found were most valuable to kind of accelerate sales once you kind of found out the different avenues to help build the brand on site?
Yeah, for me, it was really trying to figure out what it is that folks are finding us. So you talk about what are they plugging in either to their Google search, and then the retailers, when you go on to any retailer and you're like, dress, well, what are you putting in there? So again, conversation with their marketing team about, can you help me, tell me what the top 10 kind of things are, and can you tag me on those, like behind the scenes, like what is, what, and I didn't even know that, like you don't even know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you're like, is there a way? And then they're like, oh yeah, oh, we didn't have this turned on for you. And then behind their scenes, they could click on things that, can help you. I understand I'm against these huge legacy brands, but is there anything you can do for the other folks that are still, trying to build? And so putting you together with the teams that are there to help, support and help the emerging brands get some traction is key. Like talking to them and finding out what you can do, and again, not knowing these and just asking for the world and just having them say, no, that's, I'll send you over here, that's X amount of dollars, but and you're like, okay, so now
Yeah. So it sounds like just asking the questions and
asking,
yeah.
yeah, for sure. And I think that was hard just in the beginning, just kind of not being part of, a space that I didn't, and, still learning, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, from there, I was trying to figure out a way to have different price points,
Hmm.
because my whole goal is to really, cover those different spaces. And so, yeah, so it's talking to the buyers, it's talking to more boutiques. I think that for me, like, I want to be a household name. I want Vans to like say, hey, Sonia, can you help us design a shoe for kids that, have these fun prints? Or Adidas, and they're like, hey, help us make some, all those things. Like that's who I want to be. I want these large orgs and large brands and large retailers to not take our ideas or our IP and just invest in us to help them reach an audience. So that's what I do. I'm constantly like reaching out to the Barbie people and like, hey, wouldn't it be cute if, we do this? And so when I look back and for my hopes for the year and the next 3 years is really focused on collaborations, on maybe licensing and doing things like that. And so that's what I do. I'm going to be at Black History Month, Nordstrom in Chicago. Nordstrom is committed to supporting multicultural Black and Brown founders and suppliers. And so I want to be part of that. And so they're having a event, and I'll be showing that weekend, February 21st and 22nd. And so yeah, I think the retailers showing an interest and allowing me to be that face in the children's space, I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That sounds like a bunch of fun too. And you'll get to
Yes,
meet other people and of course show your brand.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So with
Yeah.
that, just being in different retailers that have kind of different price points, do you then have separate collections for those retailers?
Right. Exactly. I don't know if you remember in school, like it was I always hated picture day because my mom was like, look, you're gonna get package C. Like, don't even ask me for,
All the extras.
extras. Like, yeah, like, no buddy photos, like, none of that, right? And then if you wanted package A or package B, whatever it was. So that's what I try to do. So there's the package C, which is the dress, and then there's the parts where maybe it has an extra crocheted piece and it comes from Peru or something. We talk about that on the hang tag or on our page. So yeah, so there's going to be different price points and again trying to make it accessible. I think that for me is like my whole goal is like, well, however you're coming in to meet us, I want to be able to be there for you to have an entry point.
Yeah, no, that's great. So from a team's perspective, just being in so many retailers now, is it just you or have you had to hire outside of just yourself?
Yeah, for sure. It was me for a long time. And, of course, my husband, who, by day he does this, and at night he's behind on the website and Shopify and doing all that. But when that caused too much headache, I was like, look, if I'm going to be a real company, I'm going to, and so I had to ask myself, and this again came from talking to folks and that are leaders and in whatever field, and just saying, if you had a first hire, who would you hire? And so it always went back to, well, how are you making money? And so my first person that I hired was sales. And so that person, well, what do you need them to do? And so just kind of saying, I need you to identify, 25 stores and then present my pitch deck and those kind of things. And then the other team member is like, who's the one that helps me with not only the brands over here, but who are the ones that help with the large retailers and checking in with them and coordinating sales and all those things. So there's that partnership person. So I take care of like design. I have a team that helps me with that, and then we ethically manufacture, and so there's somebody who is in charge with certifications and tracing. For me, not only sustainability, but circularity and traceability. We have someone in charge of that, really trying to push back on fast fashion. And so that for us is making quality products that can be, gently passed on to folks. So I have somebody in that area who help with small batch here in Los Angeles so that we can make small batches for folks here in the US.
Got it. Okay. And then from a manufacturing standpoint, how do you plan to ensure that you're supporting the different retail outlets that you get those sales from?
Yeah, so any of the manufacturing and the producing part with fashion, you're projecting like sometimes a year out, right? And so, how do I know what I think is cute is going to still be there a year from now, type of thing? And then knowing that they have minimums or the MOQs, in talking with them, like, what is it? How do I, spread it across, how much money I have and how much, I anticipate are going to be taken from the different retailers. And so it's really a numbers game. It's really what are your best sellers? And again, goes back to that data that we really have to pay attention to. I just can't stress communicating
Yeah, that's
enough.
what it definitely sounds like.
It's really like, hey, I know you said 300 is your minimums. Like, I can't, but get me here and I'll come back, on this. And if you can't, then, we'll part ways and those kind of things. So just got to be ready and nimble and
Ask
really goes back
questions.
to and what you need.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would you say was the biggest challenge that you've seen being in retail stores?
I think the biggest challenge came during the pandemic, which was promising like stuff will be there, but then, shipping, like we had a backlog in the Port of Los Angeles and trying to get what you need. And so yeah, I think I lost quite a bit because of the chargebacks, and you have to have things on time. I think that was one of my biggest lessons is, the world goes on. As a solo entrepreneur, you have to be prepared and ready for any of those things that could happen. Natural disaster, California, we had fires, and you're like, wait, I got a sale coming up. What do I do? So when I think about it and folks are like, what do you recommend? I think I always talk about being resilient, and then I couple that with being relentless. So I always tell people my best thing is, R&R, you just got to be resilient and relentless. And that part where it's like, oh my gosh, how can I support my community? There's fires. Maybe I'm joining and donating the clothes, because I still have to keep talking to my customers, and not everybody's in Los Angeles. And then telling your buyers like, hey, everybody's experiencing, this challenge. I may need 2 more weeks before I deliver. And again, if you've set up those steps, I think that's what's helpful in dealing with some of the challenges that come up. But I'm thankful that the response has been great to the close, and I'm excited for, the new stuff that comes out. I love that we get to spotlight, communities that have waited. Like I grew up in Hawaii, and all the beautiful, there's the flowers and this and everything else that you see. I would love that I could put that like on a graphic tee and then say, hey, here's what the flower is about. And do you know, like, you put it on this side of your ear if you're single, this side if you're married. Like, did you know, those kind of things. So when I go into these places, I just hope that when someone sees the item that they're able to pick up on that.
Yeah, I love that too. I mean, taking like recognized silhouettes, so that's kind of the entrance to people that really don't know about it, and then putting these prints that have the heritage and education on them to help tell that story. I think is just a really thoughtful and a needed kind of combination.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So with that, I mean, you've definitely learned a lot from nursing to this, and I think just a lot of great lessons that you talked about. And you gave us a little bit into what your vision is for the future, but what are the goals for Mixed Up Clothing? Where do you see it throughout 2025 and the next couple of years?
Yeah, I want to be able to do the partnerships and the collaborations. Like even the Olympics are coming to LA, and so I'm pushing that as well. Like I'm like, hey, if you're doing kids, fun apparel and licensing, like I want to be part of that. And so working backwards, you can't just say, "Oh, I want to work in the Olympics," and then so you go on their page, you you have to work backwards and like figure out who's taking those. I stay living on LinkedIn because I'm like always like opportunities come through. So I would love to see again those large partnerships with folks. I dressed a couple of kids for Hollywood and entertainment. So I want, you know, more of that. I want folks to not necessarily think of the large legacy brands and kids wear and kind of consider the indie brands that are really have a message and really need the support other than, the larger brands that have more perhaps cachet, but we're here too. And so I think that's my next goals is to just continue to push forward and do collaborations, do partnerships, and keep folks talking about culture and heritage.
Yeah, I love that. And where can our listeners support you, buy Mixed Up Clothing, and follow the journey?
Yeah, for sure. So Nordstrom's, Target, Macy's.com, we're on their marketplaces. Just go in the search bar, put Mixed Up Clothing, and then, of course, our website, mixedupclothing.com. We're on the socials at Mixed Up Clothing. And yeah, I'm always open for an email. I look at all the DMs and I'm there. I'm just here to help. And I really appreciate programs like yours for sharing information and for allowing stories to be told. And I could stay here and turn around and ask you questions like, tell me what you see on the horizon. You talk to folks like, where are folks going? Like that's why I love listening to your programs. It's like, not only is it inspiring, but it's like gives you this window of, you know, of what's to come and trends and all those kind of forecasts. So thanks for being out here in these streets with me and trying to change the landscape. I think it's huge.
Yeah, appreciate that so much. Thank you for that. And I'll definitely link all of that in the show notes so that people can definitely follow you and purchase and be a supporter as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on. Just really strong and
Okay.
great conversation and a lot of great lessons and gems you've shared. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.